So whether it's audio issues or kind of family emergencies on both our ends, we're finally here. We finally have an opportunity to chat. So again, Kylie, I appreciate your time. So with that being said, can you provide a high level overview of who Kylie is for the audience?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I am kind of a jack of all trades. Started out, I'm from the Midwest originally, lived on the West Coast for most of my life in Texas, and I have worked remote in the cybersecurity field for almost 5 years. Before that, I was an engineer and I worked in production, various shows and in studio in the Southern California, everywhere California. And I'm a mom, I'm a professional, and yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
During our pre-call, I think you are the second guest that comes from I guess, not typical cybersecurity background, whatever that means, but you come from a music background, which I just find fascinating. I love music. For me, it's almost kind of a time capsule. When I hear a particular song, it brings me back to that point in time where I was just playing that song at repeat. But so let's start at the beginning. Fresh out of school, what did you go into initially? Because I think it started with music.
So I have a production degree, post audio, post like editing, video, and I started in my 20s. I was already working, I started as a production assistant on set on various different productions. And I kind of got into the groove of doing that I would just meet somebody. It's something I wanted to do. It was something I was curious about. So I started asking people that I knew who were doing things on set, like, hey, can I work with you? What can I do? So I started out as a lowly production assistant and I kind of worked my way up. I found a mentor in engineer and I started doing that more frequently and working on set and holding the boom, holding a 6 channel, miking people up, doing all of that. And then I kind of transitioned into my current career in a few different ways because I had a daughter when I was 30 and my life changed. So I couldn't go on tour. I couldn't lift heavy objects when I was pregnant with her. So I decided to go back to school. I got an undergrad from San Diego State University in speech, language, and hearing science because I was interested in how the brain perceives audio, like sound, frequency, any kind of auditory process. I think I was always technically minded. I was interested in the physics of sound. I was interested in mathematics and how all of that worked. What's interesting is I was a high school dropout. So when I went to school, everyone was like, how are you going to go to college again? How are you going to do all of this? And
Right.
I just kind of figured it out and I excelled at math. I excelled at certain subjects, neuroscience. And so I joined research groups and all of that. And then as I went through that process, I ended up doing theology based, which is hearing testing, fitting people for hearing aids. It's more of a sales position when you do hearing health, but I did that for about a year. And during that time, after my undergrad degree, I became a professional in that industry, but then I was contacted by University of San Diego because they were on LinkedIn trying to find women that would want to get into cybersecurity. So I got a message on LinkedIn. So I always tell people LinkedIn is such a great tool. I've had it since the beginning. It has been a blessing because I've gotten so many leads and so many connections through that. I was able to reach back out to this recruiter for school and I said, he's like, yeah, well, have you ever thought about doing cybersecurity? And I said, make you think that. And he said, you have a very technical background. I was looking at your resume and I think that you'd be great at it. And would you want to get a master's in cyber? And I said, sure, why not? And no one in my family had ever gotten any kind of higher education. I was the first person in my family to even graduate college. So I thought, well, yeah, I've always wanted a master's degree. And I got a master's degree in cybersecurity operations and leadership, which is more domain based. It's less about, engineering or network connection. It's more about policy compliance. And as we like to say, the less sexy side of cybersecurity. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it.
I want to kind of break down a lot of things that you mentioned, but the first one are, I guess, traits that you highlighted. So the first one you mentioned, curious. You have this curiosity about you, and started, the follow-up thing would be asking questions, right? And I think in the industry as a whole, and probably any profession, a lot of people struggle with that. Maybe the curiosity, not so much. Some people have it, some people don't. But the asking questions, where did that trait come from? Is that something that you saw in your siblings, in your parents, or just friends?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm an only child. And so I grew up a latchkey kid. My mom was never around. She was always trying to make ends meet. So I think as a child of like the 80s and early 90s, like we just kind of came home when our parents told us to. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have pagers. So it's like, okay, I think you can relate, right? Where
Yeah, for sure.
your mom's like, just go, just get out of the house, go. Especially if you're not at school, right? It's the weekend, and they're like, just come home when the street lights turn on, because that's when
Right.
dinner is, right? I come from a single parent household. My mom really didn't have much. My dad took off when I was a kid, so I had to figure stuff out. And I was curious from the get-go. My best friend when I was about 8 years old, her dad was a famous musician from the 60s. And I remember watching him record like analog in his living room. And I was fascinated at the age of 8 by chords and connections. And how are you doing that? I less wanted to be a rock star, and I more wanted to figure out how to produce or engineer something, which I think if you have that kind of mindset, it follows you. And it's less about the fame, more about how do things work. I was always curious, and I would ask questions, and then I just happened to fall into circles of people in Southern California that gave me the opportunity. I think it's also a location-based thing. I had the opportunity to meet people at very young ages that kind of showed me really interesting technical stuff. And then as I got older, wanting to kind of get out of my situation that I was in growing up, I just thought, I got to make something of myself. I don't know how I'm going to do it or what I'm going to do. Because I think a lot of kids, especially nowadays, where you're in your early 20s, you're like, I'm supposed to be an adult. What the hell am I doing? And you don't know where to go. And if you're shy, or if you're curious about something, but you just don't understand how it works, it's a lot harder to reach out to people because you don't have the self-esteem yet. Your prefrontal cortex isn't even completely developed yet. You don't have the reasoning skills to go, what if I just take a leap, right? What if I just keep bothering people? It's even if they're annoyed, I'm like, how do you do this? Can I work with you? And so I learned at a young age how to kind of make myself push through the fear, because I was a really quiet kid. I grew up playing the violin. I was a straight A student, and I had a very few friends. But when I got older and I realized I had a voice, I was able to push through that fear and say, hey, here I am. Give me a job. Like, figure out how this works. And as a female in a male-dominated industry, even now, right, as a woman in cyber, as a woman in any kind of technical related field, even though there's a lot more of us now, back then, there were very few female audio engineers. There were very few women that wanted to do technical jobs. And So I relied heavily on how do I schmooze with these guys who became some of my greatest mentors. But I had a lot of weird things happen too, obviously, in the entertainment industry. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a chick. Great, but pushing through that and going, whatever I can do this too. And I can also have integrity for myself. But there's a lot of rules that I had to put up. I got sober really young, so that was helpful because it's really hard to maintain any kind of movement forward if you're clouded. You can't be drinking every night and doing drugs and doing things like that and still be dependable and successful. It just doesn't work. It might for a while, but then things get screwed up. So I think because I had integrity and because I always showed up and did the job, no matter what it was, people would hire me back. And then you start developing that network, right? And so it really is about how, even if you don't know where it's going to lead you, to just stay curious, to do it anyway, push through the fear, like courage, right? Because courage isn't the absence of fear. I have this fear, but I'm going to do this anyway.
So Kylee, I really admire everything that you mentioned and just the maturity that you had at such a young age to really understand how kind of the world works, your environment. Just brings me another concept to a Spanish saying that if you don't ask or if you don't talk, nobody's going to hear you, right? And
what is it in Spanish?
So el que no habla, nadie lo oye.
Ah,
right?
I love that.
Yeah, and it's just understanding the environment. So I really admire that you're able to pick that up in, like you mentioned, in a male-dominated field. A couple of things. So I want to start talking about mentors, because I think in whatever career field anybody's at, a mentor, whether it is within a company structure and there's mentors assigned to you, or just serendipitous, you see somebody that you want to learn from, and you just, what you said, just start asking questions, right? And yes, you might be annoying, but ultimately they're going to start helping you out. So who was, I guess, your first mentor to get you more involved into the music industry?
So I had a couple of people, but my friend Ken, he was the director of Comic-Con for 11 years. I worked with him when I worked with the Dalai Lama. That was kind of the first introduction to him. And I had a friend named Rebecca Wilson. His name's Ken Freeman, but Rebecca Wilson, she went on to work for the Dalai Lama for years. And then she also went and she was the producer for TED International in New York after that. And now she does her own thing. She has her own business, but she was one of my first mentors in that world. And then Ken has remained my friend and mentor and kind of like a surrogate dad in a way over the years, because he's like, he's 60-ish and he's become a sounding board for everything, like family stuff, relationship stuff, audio stuff, cybersecurity, like all of it, right? And he's brilliant. And I learned a lot from him because he was very level-headed. He is very level-headed. I have Sydney, my mentor in cybersecurity. She was somebody I met through mutual friends. We became friends. And she saw something in me when I was in school getting my master's. And she said, hey, you should come work with us. She gave me a shot and she used to be in the entertainment world as well. And now she's a risk and compliance manager, And so there are people along the way. You have to watch how people live their lives, how they treat their families, their kids, their wives, their husbands, their boyfriends, girlfriends, parents. And then you have to see how much integrity that they have, right? So you don't want to have a mentor that is a con artist who, you watch what they do in their life. They're manipulative, they're shifty. You can't have that. You have to watch people and their trajectory, their success, whatever hardships they've gotten through and pushed through. Because I was telling my daughter the other day, she's playing basketball now and she's in 6th grade, and she's like, I'm on second team. I'm benched unless they want me in. And I said, well, you've never played. You made the team, even though you had no previous experience, and you practiced for 2 weeks and made the team. That's massive. I told her, I said, if I stopped every single time that a door shut in my face, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have this nice house. I wouldn't have had like 3 careers by now and success as a single parent if I just gave up every time somebody said no, or every time. And you hear people talk about this all the time and that are successful, whether they're professional CEOs of companies, CFOs, CIOs, CISOs, actors. I have friends that are actors and musicians. They all say the same thing. They just kept going. They believed in themselves. And you can go pretty far as long as you're willing to do the work, right? But yeah, mentorship is huge. Even with Sydney, when I first met her, she was attractive. She's beautiful on the outside, but there was something about her that I picked her brain. I went up to her and I was like, what do you do for a living? Like, what's your deal? And she said, I do cybersecurity. And I said, that's really weird because I'm in a master's program right now for cyber. And then she said, I used to work at Nickelodeon. I was like, that's weird. I used to work at MTV and like American Idol. And then our minds were blown because these universal things occur. And then you're like, this is just weird. This is too weird. And as long as you keep that spark, like sometimes you have to get a little woo-woo to think, this must be happening. I don't know why, but she just happened to be at a company that one of my old best friends used to manage part of the IT department that I grew up around. And we were in different counties completely. So I just kept asking her questions and I stayed in contact with her. And so that's one of the things too, is just staying in contact, getting to know them, finding out what their lives are like, right? If I'm working with somebody and I'm having something come up, or there's some kind of, if the team isn't quite gelling, right? What do I default to? Hey, how you doing? How's your wife? How's your little girl? Like, what's new in your life? So I go backwards and I try to find out more about them as a person and show them genuine care for their own life experience. And then we go back into work mode. So that's kind of how mentorship, I think, is born, is really being curious about people, their lives, what makes them tick. And then there's an exchange there, but it has to be selfless in a way, I think, too, because you can't just take. There's a lot of people out there that do that too. And I know a lot of those, especially in the entertainment industry.
And there's got to be a balance, right? There's this book from Gary Vaynerchuk, kind of a marketing entrepreneur. I think it's Jab, Jab, Left Hook. And talking about the jabs are providing free content on whatever your speciality is. And then the left hook is after people kind of trust the face, the words that are coming out of your mouth, whatever you're selling, then it's like, okay, well, now I can provide additional service or help you build what I'm selling and what have been given away for free for the past several months there. So there is a very unique balance. A lot of great things that you're bringing up. I wanted to go back to is, not giving up. Is that based on people's experiences? Because I think as a whole, maybe for me personally, growing up, I didn't like failure, right? Because it just left that kind of bad taste in your mouth. Is that something innate, nature versus nurture, or is it kind of developed through time based on, your experience?
I've been in therapy on and off most of my life. I think that that's really important. Right now, I'm doing the Imago stuff about like relationships and how it relates to our childhood trauma and things like that. I know it's getting a little deep, but I have a point. Like the childhood experiences that we go through, that is completely how we grow up, why we develop certain traits. Obviously, yeah, nature versus nurture, there's going to be both, right? You're going to have genetic factors, epigenetic factors. You're going to have external things that create certain responses depending on your level of trauma, socioeconomics, ethnic background. It's all part of it. And because
Right.
it's also cultural, right? I think is that if if I ever found myself in fear, like I was as a child when I was playing the violin and I was super OCD and had germ phobia and I had no friends, everybody thought I was weird and I got bullied really bad. So I just quit going to school. And, it wasn't because I wasn't a smart kid. It was because I was terrified of people because all I knew was I was going to get hurt. So I quit going to
Mm,
school. And so I was a high school dropout, not because I wasn't a good student. I was exemplary, but
right.
the system that they had set up wasn't for me. It was something that I had to get out of to be able to really grow. And at the time I felt like a failure, but I realized it was the whole societal cultural thing. They weren't doing a lot about bullying back in the 90s. They've gotten a little better, but if I felt shy, then, you know, when I got a little bit older and I started going through therapy and I started really figuring out who I was as an individual, and I stayed curious about that too, because my interactions with others, the way that I form relationships, the way that I form work relationships, all of it has to do with what are my mechanisms? How do I communicate with people? Am I short with people? Can I get frustrated? Am I demanding? Like all of these things. I think there's not enough curiosity about who we are as people on the inside because it's an inside thing. If I am pointing at you and saying everything's your fault, or pointing at my parents who are doing the best that they could with given very little, having parents that grew up in the Great Depression, I mean, we're all still dealing with all of that generational stuff. So I think it's really important to have a working knowledge of your own stuff and how you interact with others, because those kinds of things are going to affect everything in your life, your intimate relationships, your relationships with your kids, your relationships with the rest of your family, your work life, right? Because we can chameleon and go into a work situation and just go, okay, here's my work face and I'm going to just be this until I get off work. And then I'm going to just take a deep sigh and talk about how much I don't like being there. Like, no, there's a reason, right? And so how do we work with others? And if we are only doing things based out of selfishness and not of service, then we're screwed. I think a lot of people are stuck in that right now, even with the state of government. There's always a finger pointed. There's always like, I'm not like you. As long as I stay in a gray area and I use critical thinking skills, then I don't need to be so this or this.
There's always a gambit, right? It's almost like, I'm going to get nerdy. It's almost like Star Wars and the Sith, where it's only black and white, good or bad. You're with me or you're against me, right? Um, but
Yes.
back to something that you mentioned, does social media and the post-COVID world that we live in make it harder to develop these genuine connections and to learn from people and, potentially find mentors?
I believe it does, just because social media is great for networking, but you have to use it in a way that you understand. Like I've gotten jobs through Facebook, through Instagram. I've had people reach out to me through those platforms. I've made friends with people that I never knew before. And now I have friends that I've never even met up with, but I've been talking to for a decade. It's insane, right?
That's awesome.
It's powerful. But then there's a lot of stuff that is, for lack of a better term, narcissistic, the way that we portray ourselves in order to get attention. And anybody can pretend to be something, right? But there's a lot of people out there that exploit that, right? So you really have to, I think finding mentorship, the best way to do it is through work situations. And also, I love LinkedIn for that because it's kind of creeping towards social media, but it's still staying in the boundaries of, okay, this is still a work related thing. So what's really great is you can go find cybersecurity people. It used to be Twitter, right? That we would find a lot of cyber people. Now we go into LinkedIn and we can see people that work in cyber, famous as far as like they're speakers, like cybersecurity experts, Robert Metzger, all those type of guys who, if you start Googling and what's Summit 7, what's this, like, how do I find out more about CMMC? What's this other company? Any company that you work with in your field, then you can start networking with the people that work at their companies. And then you start following them. And then sometimes you're like, hey, I have a question about this. And so you can reach out like you did with me through LinkedIn, right? Will you be on my podcast? Like, yeah, that sounds cool, right? And as many people that don't pay attention to something, someone's going to find value, right? And they're going to say, oh, yeah, that sounds great. Some people are just in fear to reach out and ask questions. I will ask stupid questions on purpose. Sometimes I don't know if this is even a thing, but here's my question. I have a friend up in Seattle who I met at an MIA concert 15 years ago, who I knew played basketball. I think she knows some very famous like WNBA people too, who play women's basketball. And when my daughter was having an issue, I texted her yesterday, and I haven't talked to her in person in years, but we're still connected through social media. And I was like, hey, Quinn's pissed because XYZ is happening with her. And she's like, oh, tell her I had number 02. And then tell her my friend started in 6th grade playing, and then she went to UCLA. And then my other friend was in WNBA. Like, just tell her to just, be a team player regardless of the insecurity, that she's going to get better as she watches the games, and next year's going to be better. I'm always thinking about, who do I know that does that? And I think that that's really important. People always say, there's that saying, like, don't go to the hardware store for bread, because you have to know, if I have a friend that's not great at something and I'm going to call and I'm going to ask advice from them of something that they don't know about, and I'm expecting them to change my mind about something, and they disappoint me, right? It's because I went to the hardware store for bread. I went to the wrong place. So you have to step back and go, who is it that really knows about this thing? And then say, okay, that's who I'm going to go to for this particular situation. And I know not to go over there. And I also think it's really important not to ask too many people about one subject, because you're going to get 20 different answers, and then you're going to stop trusting your own guidance. Because sometimes you need to recognize, no, I got the answer. It's here, but you have to have the confidence to say, oh yeah, I get this, or what Sydney always says, like, Google it. I need to do something.
GPT it, right?
Yeah, or yeah, that's what all my young friends say. Oh, did you put that text in ChatGPT and have it analyze it? Oh, you can do that? Okay, cool,
Right.
And then, yeah, so.
One thing about kids, it seems, my kid is very similar. He's in baseball and like a perfectionist. So I don't know if it's this current younger generation that I've never done this, or I've done this for a while and I don't understand why I'm not good. And I try to tell them that it takes time, right?
Practice.
It takes one day at a time, 20 minutes doing, whether, my daughter's playing piano, she gets frustrated. I'm like, relax. You played well. Or my son playing baseball or both cello and viola, which is kind of crazy. It just takes time with this newer generation. Shifting topics a little bit here, Kylee. I wanted to get into how you ultimately got into cybersecurity. So you were in the music industry, and then you get a call from San Diego State University.
So that's my undergrad, but I went to University of San Diego. It's like a Catholic college.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I got a message on LinkedIn from their recruiter for their master's program. And yeah, that's how that all happened. And everyone thought I was crazy because I said, yeah, actually, that sounds cool. So I just took a leap of faith, basically.
I love that, because a lot of people, and this is going back to kind of Gary Vaynerchuk, the majority of people nowadays, they just say no. I get a lot of no's when I do reach out to people on LinkedIn. Hey, do you want to be on my podcast? They're like, no. I get no responses. So when you responded, I was like, oh my God, I finally got 1 out of 50 responding. A lot of people get freaked out, but you said, yeah, I'll give it a try. Many of the things that you've been saying that I really admire, that I wish more people would have more confidence in themselves. Like Gary says, he's like, instead of saying no, say maybe. Let me think about it. And you can reach out to your network, your trusted friends and family to say, hey, what do you think about this? Should I do this? So you get into this cybersecurity program. What domain did you flock into, or that you found interest in initially?
Because my degree was not the technically minded side, it was more of the administration and the management, the policy, the compliance, the NIST 800-171. And that is something that a lot of people who want to be a pen tester, or think that when they think about cybersecurity in movies, they're not thinking about the nuts and bolts of how do you even get a contract, right? And they can say, oh yeah, we're doing this. We have multi-factor authentication, but how are we doing that? Oh, well, we use this tool. Okay, is the tool operating in a functionality that would provide us enough multi-factor authentication to say that we're fulfilling this particular requirement? When I look at the way that I got into cybersecurity, I was never wanting to code. I didn't want to touch Kali Linux. I did it for a couple of classes and I was like, ugh, I thought hacking was cool because it just is, because that means that you know how to do stuff that you shouldn't do, like ethical hacking. But I never wanted that. I wanted more of the people-based approach of working with everyone on every team, trying to figure out the network posture. I actually got in with what I really went with my degree for, which was at that time policy and compliance. And since then, we've grown that particular team into risk. So there's risk management, vulnerability management, policy and compliance, which is my specialty, and any kind of compliance related, and also security awareness and training. So phish tests and making stuff up to try to trip people up, and then training people. I've never really wanted to be like a teacher, and I've really never wanted to be a security awareness trainer. It's just something that needed to be done in the position that I went into. So then I became like the person that went and did these presentations to different departments about security awareness. And I'm like, I don't want to do this, I want to just do policy compliance. But it turns out I'm good at it. It turns out I'm good at relating to people. So I let the universe tell me what to do, even though I was like, okay, I guess I'll go teach people about how not to click on a phishing email. But it's all important, right?
Yeah.
Because if I push that away, then I'm also not learning about another area of cybersecurity. There's so many. We have all different types of the way that we secure something. Physical security, network security, how to not click on phishing emails, how to not fall for stupid stuff, how to not click on that SMS text. No, that is not the CEO of a company that is texting me right now. How do I know that? Okay. Sometimes that is providing third-party anti-phishing program training, and sometimes that's one-on-one, right? If somebody's not getting it, you got to call them directly and have enough patience and, I guess, connection, like the ability to connect, love and tolerance, right? Give somebody a one-on-one, one person and 10,000 people in a company and say, hey, what is it that we need to go over? Is there something that you're having a hard time noticing? And is there something that we can do to help you notice next time, or help you look at what a red flag is, right? It's the same thing in personal relationships. You know, if you date somebody that might be a narcissist, I don't know, and you notice a red flag, right? Hopefully you notice those red flags so the next time you start dating somebody else, you're not falling victim to, it's a threat actor. If you look
Right.
at the world, it's all related. It's like everybody that you meet, if you think about cybersecurity in that way, you know, everything that you do in different professions, audio, video, cybersecurity, it's similar. It's just connection. It's ins and outs. It's limiters and fades and high pass, low pass. It's routers and switches and intrusion detection and antivirus. It's all, if you can think about things conceptually like that, it's who you're deciding to be friends with. Stay away from the narcissist, hang out with the people with integrity, right? Like it's a virus protector. It's an internal virus protector. It's an internal Trojan horse protector. Maybe not everybody's brain thinks this way. This is the way that my brain works. If you can conceptualize the world as a whole, holistically, no matter what you're doing, then any of these types of idea systems can work, right? And also help you understand what you're doing.
I do something similar with analogies. Typically in cybersecurity, our technical jargon is off the charts. And when we're talking to people that don't live in our space, we're kind of confused, we're a little angry. Well, what do you mean you don't know about routers or IPSs or IDSs? But it starts at the basics, right? About phishing and what the adversaries or the threat actors are doing. Whether from a nation state, what's their motivation, what's their goal, and from the cyber criminals, you know, primarily financial there. So I love how you kind of break it down and make it relatable to your average person that doesn't live in our space to start thinking conceptually and using analogies. The analogy that I use is like you're protecting a 1 million room mansion with all these doors and windows. So for example, asset control is, well, how many doors do we have? I don't know. Well, if we don't know how many doors we have into the house, then we cannot protect the house. Talking to finance, talking to legal, and the feedback that I've given.
HR. Yeah.
Right. HR, they said, after my presentation, my spiel, I asked, hey, is there any questions? Like, no, but by far, that was the best overview of cyber I've ever received. I'm like, oh, well, that means a lot. So, but just like you mentioned, making those connections and helping people start thinking differently to this kind of technical space that we live in there. So I definitely love that.
And to point that out too, real quick, is that's what's really important as a trainer too. Even though you got a big brain and you know so much about cybersecurity, you have to be able to be personable and relate to what it is that somebody is going through. Because they're not going to understand our technical stuff. They're not. How do I break this down into simpler terms that anyone could understand? And that's actually being very caring about your audience. And when you can do that, then people really do listen. They're engaged because you're actually giving them respect.
I definitely agree with you, Kylee, 100% about showing that respect. And like you said, there's a lot of selfishness going around when it comes to social media, influencers, etc. And maybe it could be said within our industry where it's like, what do you mean you don't get it? It's pretty simple. When you're talking technical jargon, nobody's going to understand them. But I want to shift to talk about the word of the millennia, generative AI. What is your thoughts? How are you currently using it, both in and out of work? And what's the future hold for us in Gen AI?
Let me share this just so that if anyone out there is listening to this, don't share any sensitive information,
Good point.
proprietary, confidential, controlled, unclassified. Don't share anything that you should not put in from your company, personal and identifiable information in any kind of open source AI. Okay. That's just the disclaimer, right? I've used it to make statements in a resume sound more concise. I've used it when I have writer's block. I know people that have used it to write whole books and then just go through like little guides and go through and edit and then publish. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Now, I think obviously that human creativity is always going to be larger than computer because our brains are the most intricate computers that exist. Robots don't have empathy. They can synthesize it, but they can't actually feel it, right? Well, yet, who knows? We might get there too, right? And then they will take over. No, but I'm reading a book called Nexus by one of my favorite authors who I told you about, Yuval Noah Harari. Shout out. Love him. And he's brilliant. And I've just started reading Nexus. It's a hefty book. And in it, he talks about information systems over time and even going back to the birth of the civilization, spoken language, written language, cuneiform, phonetics, all of that stuff, which I'm also
Right.
a nerd for because of my previous degree in speech, language, and hearing. But it's fascinating because we talk about living in a society of information, but what is information? He poses those questions. Information can be anything that you share, but is it real? Is it valid? That's always up for question. It's always a debate, which is how we get into disinformation that's also shared. Or even a fish, right? Is this coming from the CEO of my company? It's information. I'm receiving an email, but he needs $5,000 right now, and I need to hurry up and send it to him, and he's going to text me a code, and then I need to give him my social security number. See, so it's dangerous. And depending
Right.
on who is the receiver of such information or disinformation, real or imagined, that's where you have the caveat. As with anything, there are good points, there are difficult points. It's really important to have critical thinking skills, and not everybody has those. If I'm dealing with
Right.
an older crowd, or somebody always calls me, my grandma fell for a phishing attempt, right? Then I need to understand that that person may not have grown up around this technology, may not have the ability to understand that they are getting had. And so they're going to consume information much differently, especially with things like AI, right? They're going to believe a computer-generated image, maybe a political commentary or something that's not real. They might believe that because they don't know that that was done with AI. I mean, our minds are probably going to be blown in the next 10 years about just how much further we're going to go with technology. It's never going to stop. It's just continued on an upward trajectory since it started. So do we embrace it, use our critical thinking skills, try to find ways to make sure that there's not a bunch of breaches and things are trying to stay as secure as we can get them?
My, personal opinion is I think we've lost that critical thinking in this country, right? When it comes to religion, when it comes to obviously politics, we're not thinking to say, well, is this information really going to benefit me in the long run? Whether it's even generated by artificial intelligence, you're definitely on point there. It's here to stay. And I guess my thinking a little bit more deeper into this, where does quantum computing come into play, right?
Ooh,
because quantum computing is a whole different concept of computing. And when I was in government, I actually did very sensitive things that I can't even talk about still. But I did a lot of research on quantum computing. But just kind of curious when that starts being consumed by the consumer rather than kind of staying at the nation state level.
It's really interesting to me. I have a friend, I believe, that took an online class at Harvard about this. She's been learning generative AI and quantum computing, and I really want to pick her brain. I'm actually going to see her in Los Angeles in a few weeks over the holidays, and she's brilliant. Obviously, she's always like, "I'm taking another class through Harvard," you know. Oh yeah, not a big deal. And she's like a mom to 2 little kids, and
Wow.
like, okay, you know. So, but I really want to ask her about this because I don't have. It's not something I've thought a lot about as a consumer product, but obviously there's probably people using it right now in the consumer landscape, just not readily accessible as it's probably going to be. And I think you're right. Like it's going to go on everything is going on an upward trajectory because it's just like, you know, when CDs came out and they were really expensive and CD players were really expensive. And then it became consumerized and then all the prices went down and then it became inconsequential. I think technology over time has that kind of bell curve, right? Right now it's AI, but they're probably going to, and it's like on the upward trajectory, and it's probably going to bell and fall back down again as they develop something new, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like quantum computing, as it becomes more consumerized, right? Well, now we want the next thing. Now we want the next thing. We want to see how much more stuff we can do, right? And I think that human innovation is kind of limitless unless a big asteroid hits our planet and then the asteroid's just going to be
over.
Yeah, like, haha, you guys think you're so cool, you know? Good try, you know? Go the way of the dinosaurs. There's a humbling effect to it, right? We can't get too high and mighty, but we do. And then we start trying to run the show. And that's part of innovation, because if nobody tried to do that, then it wouldn't succeed, right? We wouldn't have all these really cool things to play with. But ultimately, put in the hands of the wrong people, it's very dangerous. Like all of this stuff is dangerous, but that's the way that it's been, you know?
Yeah.
Give anybody a red button and the wrong...
Don't press it.
Yeah. No matter what we do individually to learn about this stuff, to continue making innovation, we have to understand that we can't control what other people do. And that's really the thing.
So I could probably talk for hours. I love your life, your career, the way you think, but I'm going to do something I've never done before here. So you're kind of a test subject, kind of a lightning round, because there's other questions that I want to get to with respect to cyber that would love to get your perspective on. So the first one would be, what advice would you give to transitioning professionals wanting to get into cyber, and then students?
So for students that want to get into cyber, it doesn't matter what undergrad you have, you can always get a master's degree in cyber. That's the beauty of having an undergrad already. If you don't have an undergrad and you want to get into cyber and you're like, gosh, I don't want to go to school for all that, then I would suggest getting the basics, CompTIA Security Plus, start learning it, see if you're even minded for understanding the way a network works, understanding how generally how computers work. You will find out very quickly by studying a 500-page CompTIA book to study, right? If that's really going to be your vibe, right? And if it's something you think you can wrap your head around even slightly, know that you don't have to be a professional to start working in the industry. Any kind of engineering or anything like that, start Googling which types of certifications do I need? Because most of the people that I know that I've worked with don't even have undergrad degrees. They just have a bunch of certs. And then with other professionals from different industries that want to get into cyber, I would say you need to ask yourself if you are motivated enough to go get those certifications too. And then if you want to get another degree that's related to cyber, or if you just want to get certifications, you don't have to know what you're doing right away. You're going to learn on the job, because no matter what cert you have, no matter how much training you've had before you start working, and no matter what degree you have, we all know that's just a tip of an iceberg. And you don't really learn until you're working.
What has surprised you the most within the industry?
Just how fun it is. I think it's really cool. Like, it's never boring. There is never a shortage of stuff to do. In fact, we're all completely overworked. But that's job security, right? There's a lot of awesome companies out there. And the beauty with the industry is you just learn so much working with others. And if you find that you're in a certain position in cyber that you don't really like, you can go into something else because you're working with another team and you're like, I want to be a pen tester. Then you can go over there. It's so versatile and there's so many different areas of it. I think people think of cybersecurity as one static thing. And it's not. It's like 15 different things working together in unison.
How do we increase representation of women in cybersecurity?
Yes. That one's a political one. It's hard. It's hard.
Of course, all easy questions that I'm throwing at you there.
I think I can't give people confidence. I can't. I can talk at somebody I've done this because I've mentored people. I mentor young women too. And I have talked to them till I'm blue in the face. And some people just have the drive and some don't. It always comes down to self-esteem. That is something I can't give people. We are not all okay all the time. I feel like a failure sometimes. And I feel like I can't even believe I think I can do this right now. A lot. But pushing through it, having some kind of confidence. And it's not a male-dominated industry because only men can do it. Like, this isn't like I'm lifting construction stuff and, like I'm not as strong or whatever. This is a brain capacity thing. And women are actually really well wired to do many different things at the same time. Like, we actually have the capacity, right, especially as mothers, to have a multitask, right? This is a career that really requires that, right? To be on top of a lot of things. I think knowing that the industry is growing with women in it, that there's a ton of mentors that you can get that are women, and there's people that are going to believe in you and foster that. And you don't have to just go into female dominated things because that's what your mom did or that's what your grandma did. You can do whatever the hell you want. And you can do it as a single mom. My daughter's father died when she was 1. I've been doing all of this with this mindset that I'm going to make a different life for her than how I had to grow up.
Yeah, I definitely love that. So the last question, this is going to be an easy one because I always ask this of all my guests. I know you already mentioned this book and actually bought the book Nexus based on our pre-call. So any other books that you would recommend for the audience?
Oh, gosh. I've been doing the imago therapy stuff. And that's a really good one, just as how do you communicate with others? It's going back to childhood, caregivers, things like that. I think that that's just important anyway, because it's also going to affect how you work with people, like what you do. Let me find what the name of that is. I'm going into my Audible. I have a ton of books. I mean, Sapiens is always really good too, but I'm not going to just like,
I know,
I'm not just going to like, he's my favorite. So Getting the Love You Want, it's an old book by a husband and a wife. They're doctors, I think, of psychology, but that's a really good one. I prefer the actual written copy of that over the audiobook. And then The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. Also The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. The Art of Seduction is about basic manipulation skills, even though you can use them for good because they exist. Our psyche produces these effects, like whether you go into a job interview, whether you are meeting somebody for the first time, We have a seductive quality about us that draws people in, but it's how to use it. Like if you're disingenuine, you're not going to win people over, like there is a way
Right.
to still have integrity and work well with others and figure out how people tick and how to do all of that.
Yeah, definitely love that. So actually, I lied. I do have one more question based on your music background. Favorite band and song?
Oh my gosh. So Earth, Wind, and Fire is always going to be my favorite, like since I was a child, because I grew up in a house that we listened to a lot of funk. And so I love Earth, Wind, and Fire. Gosh, my favorite song, that is so rough because it's not an Earth, Wind, and Fire song. I mean, I worked with every genre. We're talking like underground, hip hop, rock and roll, metal. Favorite song, that's too hard.
We might have to do that in the second interview that I hope to get you back on.
Yeah, you know what? I think anything, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. I love hip hop too. Tribe Called Quest, like you name it. Like I'm all over the place. New
90s
York
hip hop
Dolls,
or
Pixies. Yeah,
there you go.
90s hip hop. But my daughter has gotten me into more Frank Ocean, Kendrick Lamar, SZA. So our kids keep us relevant if we let them. Don't turn down the music that your tweens and teenagers are showing you because it's going to keep you relevant. I'm in my 40s.
That's
I want to be
point.
relevant, I don't want to like slink away just because I'm getting older. I don't believe in that. So
love it. Again, Kylee, I appreciate your time. I know we're way over our allotted time, but thank you. This has been an incredible conversation. I just love your curiosity, your authenticity. I think that definitely conveyed over our conversation. But again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It was great. And I hope to talk to you soon.